Super, and we live. Welcome back to yet another session with the product folks. Seeing a lot of familiar faces from last night. So with us today. Hi Akash.
Hey, hi, Swas.
Smart will probably tell you all a little more about today's topic as well as our speaker's intro. But just before that, I'll give you a quick shout out into today's agenda. And for folks who are joining us for the first time, a little bit about the community. The Product Folks is a volunteer driven community of product managers, enthusiasts, marketers, analysts, and more. We've been around for almost 2 years now across multiple channels. You could check out our Slack channel, that's where a lot of product folks hang out today. We have a couple of initiatives for early stage folks as well as late stage. If you're looking to build a career in product management, do check out learnpmwith.me. That's a curated set of resources, free to access, and should give you a fair understanding of what product management is all about. Another one that we have is called Insurjo.club, again free. It is an early stage APM program. An announcement for this year's program should be out very soon on our Twitter channel, so do stay tuned. We have a bunch of other initiatives. I'll probably put a link in the chat section. We have the teardown coming up for this month. So lots and lots of initiatives for early stage folks. In case you are already on the product roadmap and you want to grow in this, we have a couple of initiatives coming up for you. We'll share that in the chat section, but I don't want to hold this up anymore. So Smart, over to you, and excited for this.
Super awesome. So hope you're enjoying your Saturday, everyone. Welcome to Tech 101 for PMs with Aakash Dharmadhikari. Aakash is a very special guest for all of us here at TPF. And yeah, keeping up with the tradition, I'll first intro what we'll be covering in the next, say, 1 hour. And then, of course, we'll also introduce Aakash and how his journey has been over the years. So Tech for PMs is one of the most sought after sessions. So Has, you already mentioned that as well. So we've got a lot of requests to do this particular session. So here we are finally, having this on a Saturday. And I personally feel that this knowledge is missing in a lot of places. And this is something that you won't find online very easily. And it's absolutely true that you don't need to be an engineer to be a great PM. That's counterintuitive, but yes, it's true. I've experienced this myself. To think that you can survive in product without having a deep knowledge in tech, you may just want to consider your argument again. So I'm a non-tech PM myself, so I wrote a few handful lines of code when I was back at college, and feel there's tremendous potential to build a strength here. And I know that there are a lot of folks who are currently product managers with various organizations, and everyone's procrastinating that tech is something that they can develop, but how, like, what's the strategy here? On the other hand, there's Aakash, who's made this journey on a much bigger scale with first with, of course, C42 Engineering, his previous startup, and then Gojek during its meteoric rise in the final few years as well. So yeah, the stuff that we'll be quickly covering. So Akash's journey into product management is what we'll start with. We'll also cover where tech understanding really helps in particular product roles. What kind of expectations one product manager usually should have from the tech folks. A few hypothetical situations there as well, and what must-haves are there versus what good-to-haves are there when it comes to particular product. Understanding tech, and also some mental models to just wrap up. And of course, we'll have a Q&A. So keep coming up with your questions. Do mention those on the right. There's a session. There's a particular button there, questions. Just keep putting your questions there. We'll keep picking up from there. And yeah, about Aakash. So Aakash has been a software engineer during his early years with Infosys. He was also a founder of two failed startups, as he likes to say. Then found C42 Engineering, which was later acquired by Gojek. And in one of those unique instances, Akash joined Gojek, and was director of product analytics there as well, and then moved into SVP engineering role. So yeah, he's walked the full cycle from software engineering to tech, and then product, and then back to tech again. So I'm sure there are a lot of insights for everyone here. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Without any further wait, Akash, I hand this over to you. The session is all yours. Thanks, everyone, and have a great time.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks to us. Um, and first of all, thanks for having me. But I really want to mention something which is very close to heart for me. That thanks for building out this community, and not just you, probably like a lot of people out there. Because I remember when I started my first product journey, maybe around 2012, when I built my first failed product. Uh, I mean, yes, there were books available and there were blog posts available and some YouTube videos available. But it's one thing to uh, meet people who are facing similar problems as you, who are in the same geography, who have the same access to talent, who have the same expectation from the non sort of product stakeholders around you. It's really about that ecosystem. So while great books were available, not being able to meet someone who was walking in those shoes in that area is a big limitation. So I mean, we always used to say at that time that the strength of Silicon Valley is, like not just the talent it has, but really the community who is ready to share. And in the last 4, 5 years, all right, are you able to see it?
Yep.
Okay, fine. Um, so just given the overall topic over here, I'm assuming most of you come from the opposite end of the spectrum. I think as Suhas or Smith mentioned, that I started my journey really from the engineering side, uh, and then moved into the PM side. For you, most of it, I'm assuming, is really starting from the PM, and you're trying to understand what that overall journey looks like. So maybe like a brief about my journey, while Smart has already captured that. So I've been coding for a fairly long time. So since 2005, I started till 2012. I was very happy to geek out on IDs and editors and languages and databases, so on and so forth. Um, in 2012, I started like my first startup, which was Ruby Monk as a product. I don't think it's still around now. Um, and it worked pretty well. We actually had a really good product market fit, but we did not have any monetization model, so that failed. We started a second one, which had a great monetization model, but we could not really get in product market fit. But even during this time, building these two startups, I don't think I ever identified myself as a product manager. That wasn't really labeled. I was just like one of the engineers who tends to take more interest in talking to customers. That's about it, maybe. Uh, After these 2 years of burning our money and having nothing to show, we basically gave up on products. Started a consulting company, started working with some interesting clients, built a really good boutique company to do that. And ironically, that is what led to me again going back into product management. So Gojek acquired my company, C42 Engineering, in October 2015, around that time. Um, and things were just sort of exploding around that. Gojek was growing really fast. I was still working there as an engineer. Um, and a lot of problems were happening around. Nobody was happy with the engineering team. The engineering team was not happy with the stakeholders who that we were dealing with. Like fundamentally, things were not happening properly. As I just wore my problem solver hat, which is what pretty much every product manager is, and started digging in, I realized that the problem was really upstream in the how products were probably being managed. And for any startup, for any company, the de facto product manager is really the CEO of the company. So started engaging with Nadeem Makarim, the then CEO of Gojek, and argued quite a lot, where he finally said that, okay, if you have so much problem with the way I'm managing the product, why don't you take it over? And that's really how I started managing products at Gojek. So in 2016, I took over the overall product management at Gojek, continued to be in that role for about 2.5 years beyond that. But that's really ironically how I moved from being an engineer, a little bit of a dabbing with the product management, going back to engineering and back to products. Uh, my takeaway personally over here was that product management at the end of the day is just solving problems. And while you solve these problems, your overall tech understanding really helps. And I saw that not just with myself, but even the PMs that I was hiring and mentoring at that point. I could clearly see the difference between product managers who are comfortable with technology versus people who are, well, I wouldn't use the word averse maybe, but a bit hesitant towards understanding and having conversations around technology. And it makes a huge difference in the way you build confidence with your stakeholders, the way you address your tech team concerns. Generally, any product management job of be it a prioritization or the various trade-offs that you have to take, especially for early stage companies. Having a good understanding of technology uh, makes a huge difference. While I want to call out that it's not so much about having a knowledge about what is a statically typed language versus dynamically typed language, that makes no difference to you as your PM skill set. So it's really more about the comfort of around technology rather than the knowledge about technology, and which probably is the first takeaway that I would want you to take from here. uh, I don't think it's important for you to go and take data science courses or go and learn some programming skill sets. It'll help in some way, but not for the reasons that you understand that technology. It's just because now you're more comfortable speaking that language. So yes, it's really about the comfort and not the knowledge. Um, One of the ways to think about this whole problem, and I've always found it to be very interesting, where as a PM, you have a very high patience with your customers, right? You never say that, oh, the customer is stupid, the customer doesn't know what he's doing. You're always infinitely patient with your customers. Uh, you can use the same mental models actually within your own teams as well. So just using those mental models, now imagine if you could just be as you are. And in your life you have a tech counterpart, like the tech lead for your team is someone who really speaks business, right? He's able to go and deal with all the stakeholders. He can work with sales team, he can work with customer support. He's able to understand what you're worried about and what your aspirations are, and things are just working perfectly fine. I hope many of you have such a tech counterpart to work with, although it's rare for sure. You learning about technology, you being comfortable about technology, it's really just meeting her halfway through. So this is your part of the responsibility that you should really do, and it helps quite a lot. Uh, but again, you are here, so I don't think I need a lot of convincing as to why you should learn about tech. So let me go into what we will be covering today. We surely need to understand, like, do you really know that if you have learned enough, like how much do you really need to understand tech? Who needs to understand tech? Like, are there a particular set of PMs who need to understand tech a lot more than others? Which one do you fit into? Because ultimately, the base assumption here is that you're not learning tech because you're super interested in it. It is something, it's a skill that you want to acquire in order to do a better job. So you really need to know how much is enough. Second thing is, what does even understanding tech mean? As I mentioned, it's not really about learning about languages. There is something else. So we need to define a success criteria for, have you understood tech, right? So I will give you some of those mental models to think about, some questions to ask yourself, which will tell you whether you already understand enough or not. What are the must-have versus good to haves in this? and some mental models that you can take away and use in your daily work. That's really what I'll be covering in this talk. The first one, as I mentioned, is really the target segment. Let me quickly go through the way I would segment product managers themselves. So the first one, of course, is the product stage, right? Are you in a pre-product market fit, just building 0 to 1, or you are in a stage where your product is completely mature and most of your problems are in business strategy and partnerships and stuff? So of course, at the two extreme ranges, the requirement for understanding technology changes quite rapidly. Uh, if you are working in a team which is really building out new systems right now, you absolutely need to understand tech a lot more in compared to the other extreme, where really the product management is not so much about rapidly developing new products. It's really about finding the right use of an already built product in a newer and newer ecosystems. Uh, and as that focus changes, of course, the amount of knowledge that you need and how much you will get involved in technology discussions will also change. Rate of change, not all products and not all startups are made same. If you are, think of it this way. If you have a very fast rate of change in your product requirements, then the amount you need to be involved in technical decisions and prioritizations are higher, because you are doing uh, that much prioritization or those many trade-offs or decision. And if that is the case, so if your rate of change is higher generally in your company, you can assume that you really need to know a lot more about tech versus something where you have like a 2 months of roadmap, which means you can just give that roadmap to your tech lead and he might come back to you for some decisions here and there. But it's fine. I mean, you can afford not to understand to some degree. By the way, all of these are very relative. Um, it really depends on who your tech counterpart is, right? If you have the person who can speak business, then the amount of information that you need on the technology side is much lower in compared to the otherwise. And just clubbing all of these things together, what is your responsibility? Like, are you someone who is currently trying to find product market fit, either for a feature or for an optimization, for a complete module, whatever it is? So the scale can change. But if that is the case, you need to understand a lot about technology, going all the way down. If you're trying to merge your business strategy and product strategy, the amount of information that you need for tech is much lower. So that's roughly the way you will do segmentation. So you know where you fall in this spectrum. The second question, as we mentioned, is, do I know enough tech? So I will give you 4 or 5 questions really and perspectives in which you can, those questions you can ask yourself and see if things work out. So first of all, you need technology understanding or comfort to build trust in your team. And I don't mean your team trusting you. I really mean you building trust in your team. Because in a stressful situation, it's natural for you to question the understanding, competency, and bias of your tech team. I mean, we will be foolish if we say that, you know what, it's all hunky dory and I know that I have the best people in my team. Nothing ever goes wrong. Everybody does the best they can. Even with the best of the confidence levels, when things get stressful, it's human nature. It's your job to be critical about every decision that is being made. Nobody said product building was a peaceful activity, right? Now, at that point, are you able to understand why your team is concerned about something that nobody else is concerned about? Are you able to appreciate why something seemingly simple just takes too long to build? Uh, your ability to answer these questions will help you assess your own trust in your team. So with a lack of comfort in conversations around technology, the likelihood that you're going to start losing your trust in your own tech team is very high. Uh, that's just how it works, right? Because you are trying to manage something which you don't understand. So how do you decide whether to trust the team or not when things are not going well, and most of the time they don't. Uh, in a similar way, as a PM, you are the first layer of QA for your product. In early stages, you might not have a QA. I would rather recommend that you don't have one. So a success criteria over here is you need to understand how your product is built to imagine how it can fail. In a high pressure scenarios, do you know exactly whom to reach out to when things fail? Are you able to guess where a bug might creep in when you are testing your features or when you are writing your specs? Because if you can't wear that cap, the overall quality of the product that gets delivered is lower. And then saying that, oh, I need to add few more manual QAs and the automation QAs, and I want developers to do the test, all of that is fine. I mean, those are all very good things to have, but that doesn't really take away the benefit a PM with a good technical understanding will have over a PM who doesn't have that confidence, right? Uh, so, and one way to look at this is like the TL and PM can add best value to each other when they can shoulder some of each other's responsibilities. With a tech lead and a PM, you can almost imagine like a overlapping set of responsibilities. And the more overlap they are able to have with each other, when one side requires support, the other person can shoulder it. You will have a substantially better product team health and general delivery. Uh, I think now we can reverse the whole thing, right? How frequently do you have to say to your stakeholders that, hey, let me get back to you after talking to my team? I mean, it's fine. It happens like once or twice and for some really large questions and some really hairy problems. But if that happens very frequently, you are ultimately going to lose the trust of your stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, it can be the CEO of the company, it can be the sales head, the customer care person, whoever it might be, right? They need to know that when they discuss with you, they can make progress. How frequently your guesses have gone wrong, right? Because if you are, I mean, at times you're forced to guess and just move on with the conversation. How many times you're able to guess correct? When things do go wrong, as they always do, did your stakeholders walk away in frustration or by having confidence that you have everything in control? So that's really what this all boils down to. At one level, you can say that, you know what, I don't need to understand tech at all because I'm going to have this great tech lead who can talk to everyone and explain his side of the business and just be with me all the time. But that doesn't really work. So you need to make up for that missing presence. So if you are able to, now just going back, if you are able to take a judicious call about whether to trust your team or not, whether you are able to understand what creates anxiety in them, are you able to imagine where things can fail, are you able to explain to your stakeholders why things don't work or the way they work? If you can do all of that, then you understand tech. You don't need to understand any more than that, right? That's really the test of whether you understand. It's not about someone asking you a programming question. So first of all, these are the questions you should ask and just decide whether you really need to learn more or not. The moving away from there, there are two other aspects, which is one, you need to be able to make sense of data. So this is where your SQL part comes in. I don't think I need to speak a lot more about it. And the last one I will talk about is probably a bit of a daydreaming. Your overall daydreaming will be of much higher quality if you know what is possible and what is not possible. If this happens to you 3 times in a row, where you think about some amazing feature, you go to your tech team and say that, hey, can we make this happen? And they just say that, hey, dude, like, what are you thinking about this? This doesn't work this way. The fourth time, you will not really daydream. So it's really important that you are able to think about how to mold around your features, mold around your systems, and imagine how things work. So I'll start with maybe some tips and tricks on this. What I mean by tips and tricks here is, let's say as a new PM, you go into a completely new domain, a new team. How do you really understand what you need to understand? So my recommendation to you is go sit with a developer and ask him that, hey, don't explain anything to me. Can you just walk me through the schema? So ask him to get the database schema. and walk through what each table is, what each column is, what are possible values in those columns, how these tables are related to each other. A good way of visualizing this is, visualizing sort of spreadsheets or Excel sheets where the data gets stored. But once you start at this level, where ultimately all the states get stored, at the end of this exercise itself, you will have a substantially better confidence level about what's happening in your product, even on day one. So this is my preferred way of starting, even when I join a new team. The second is it's really all about nouns and verbs, domain mapping. Ensure that the language that your users speak, that your sales team speaks, the language that you speak is the same that the code is written in. Right? So once you start looking at your tables, you know what the nouns are, because like the table names typically are the nouns, like user, the customer, orders, trucks, whatever you may have. And then your code is all about what do you do on those. So once you start modeling and making sure that you are speaking to your development team and the stakeholders in the same language, it'll make things a lot more easier for you to understand how the rest of the system works. Another good mental hack that I had given one of my PMs was replace systems with people. What I mean by systems is typically when you ask a developer about, hey, why is something going to take time? Like he or she might start explaining to you about, oh, there is this one particular service which talks to some other service, and a lot of things happen in the background. And you might just find it overpowering asked about the details, because you're trying to visualize the infrastructure and the services and the code bases. A good hack over there is ultimately all programming is about message passing, right? Who talks to whom and what does that person says. So I would recommend that you literally take every system in front of you, imagine that person as a human being, give them those names, and then ask the developer to explain who talks to whom about what, who knows about what, who is the source of truth for those tables that you saw about this particular table or that particular table, who asks for more information. It's just because we are human beings. Suddenly, your threshold for understanding these things will go much lower. You will be able to visualize what's happening. You will be able to understand how information flows from one system to another. Just that inherent resistance to talk about technology will go away, because you're not talking about technology. You're really just talking about people. Now, in all of these systems, there is one particular aspect. I know this is a bit out of the blue, but in case there are any asynchronous systems, I like just ask this question to your tech team. Pay a lot more attention to it, because this is where a lot of things can fail. Right? And I'm pretty sure most of you know what asynchronous is. I'm just calling out that, hey, this is something very important. This is where a lot of failures can happen. This is where a lot of complexity can happen. So just be respectful of when you see something like this, and try to understand in what all ways things can go wrong, because this is where most of the things will actually go wrong. I think that's it, really. Like in terms of tips and tricks, or the mental models to use while explaining these systems. If you go through these, you start with tables, understand all the tables, understand the whole schema, figure out what the nouns and verbs that are used by your developers, understand how services talk to each other, and understand what are the high risk areas. There is really nothing else that you need to understand. It's not really about understanding languages and the different databases. It's about how the complexity gets modeled. And maybe that's where I will get into what's so special about coding, right? The special thing about is there is no ambiguity. The reason I mentioned about the nouns and the verbs and the databases mentioned over here is you and I, as a human being, we deal with ambiguity, right? I just said that go and understand asynchronous systems. Like there is no one particular definition of asynchronous systems. You will go and figure things out. But when a developer tries to write a code to create a certain workflow, it's a binary system. Binary means it's like true or false. There is no other third state possible. So every possible nuance, every possible state for all the workflows, all the values, all the validations, the sheer amount of details that needs to be captured, um, it's too much. And most importantly, when two humans communicate, they never communicate in this disambiguous level, and which is where your job gets very tricky when you are trying to convert that ambiguity into code, right? So it's something to appreciate things around. Now, the closest parallel you can always have to programming uh, is actually legal contracts. Because in legal contracts, everything sort of gets defined, and which is why you will also find that in blockchains, like people are trying to write contracts over there. But in this particular case, rather than one lawyer writing one contract, you have a team of 10, 20, 100 developers who are trying to write completely unambiguous contracts at the same time. This is what makes the developers' lives a lot more difficult, because one person would have written something that the other person doesn't understand. And one of my favorite author when it comes to programming wrote this quote that, like I've been quoting for last 10 years. Any fool can write a code that a computer can understand. It's actually quite easy. The bigger problem is writing codes that human can understand. So most of the time when uh, developers are taking a longer time to work on something, it's not because writing that code that executes on the machine is difficult. It's really about writing the code that they themselves will understand 6 months down the line. Forget about someone else, is incredibly difficult. And that is where you understanding the language that they use, your users, sales, customer support, and your code base using the same nouns and verbs will go a long way in removing the ambiguity from the overall setup. So that's really in a nutshell, as a PM, how you can bridge the gap with developers. That's from me. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks so much, Akash. I think that was a great primer in the 30 minutes that you could fit in. Just enough to open up. We have tons of questions on the chat section. We have a couple that we've received on the community. So we'll probably club a bunch of them. And as time permits, we'll try coming up and pushing some that you can take up now and some that you can probably take up after the session. So Smart, I'll probably kick off one question that I see here is from someone who is looking to break in, right? I think most of the tech covered for PMs who are on the job. What are the specific things in tech that they really need to upskill in? For someone who's probably trying to crack interviews, and Akash, you can talk this from maybe a Gojek perspective or, in a general tech startup perspective. While you are hiring PMs, right, on that interview, if there is a tech interview and if someone is from a non-tech background, what exactly or how exactly should he or she prepare for it?
I can answer that question, but I think there is a fundamental premise over there that I want to question.
Yeah.
If you are so you're saying that there is someone from a non-tech background but is moving into PM.
Correct.
And
exactly.
is also interviewing somewhere.
Yes, he's trying to break into product and looking to probably
my
manager at Gojek, for example.
Yeah. Sure. My honest recommendation over there is please try to look for responsibilities of a PM in your current company rather than change company, change domain, and change your role at the same time. It's going to be incredibly difficult. Having said that, sure, let's assume that we talk about someone who is trying to become a PM in the same company, because most companies will also then check for that, right? You should be able to explain how a particular system works. And again, when you're explaining on the whiteboard, the same mental models that I mentioned would really help. Let's assume that you are doing managing some sort of an order management system, or you are building ride hailing. Just being able to say that, hey, this is how my system works. These were the challenges. This is where technology team probably faced some problems. Having that context and being able to explain that in an interview uh, is golden. You don't have to answer any technology questions. It's really about empathy. Do you understand what your tech team goes through is probably the crux of the question, not about if you understand technology.
Fair. And thanks for keeping that real. I mean, it was easy for you to probably give them a bunch of resources, but no, thanks for pointing it out. I think the path is more important, right? They can probably just Google and find out, hey, what are the skill set or what to pick up. But what you mentioned is super important. That it's incredibly hard to change multiple things, multiple moving factors at the same time. So, yep, I think hope that helps. Smart, do you want to pick up the next one? Then I can come up with the.
Yep. So yeah, just one comment before I pick up a question. I love the deck, of course, and I recall that when we were like when I first talked with you, Akash, like over emails, we connected. You explicitly mentioned that you're not a big fan of slide decks, and you also mentioned that you get more across when you are in a conversation rather than one-sided delivery. So that also means that we have a lot of time left for Q&A. So just wanted to put that out as well.
Yeah.
One highly voted question that I see in the questions was on APIs. So Kunal asked if APIs and integrations, are a really important part of the entire product journey. So what is the level of depth that a product person should know about APIs in particular? And of course, there's also a premise here that we're not talking about designing an API per se, but testing the matrix, the entire performance grid that you would have, and how would you learn more about that?
Okay. APIs is a very tricky one. I mean, for any human being to understand, even developers deal with it, and not so much from understanding perspective, but from managing perspective. Because at any point, you are dealing with something that you can't visualize, that you can't put shape to. Your brain doesn't work very well, right? It just takes too much effort to deal with it. And there is really no good way to put shapes and any other analogies around APIs. What I would recommend is in this particular case, I'm assuming you are primarily facing problem in either understanding how your system works, or um, maybe you actually have to deal with APIs because your tech team or someone has basically said that, you know what, I have these APIs ready. Why don't you just use that to do something on the back end rather than building some new portal or interfacing with it, which is a very common pattern that you're seeing right now. Please work with your tech teams to build either CLI clients or use things like Postman to ease the resistance in using APIs. So there are two parts, right? One is understanding APIs, for which I would say it's just message passing. Forget about whether it's a post and get and put and all that doesn't matter. What matters is you knowing that, hey, I have these APIs. Each API has a job. Each API takes a certain set of information and churns out certain set of information. This is something you can visualize and understand in a completely non-technical way. It's no different than knowing the Indian bureaucracy where, oh, if you want to apply for this particular passport, you have to go to this office and submit these forms. It's no different than APIs. You basically make a certain submission, either those get validated, they get rejected. If everything goes through, you get certain response. You will probably have like 100 of those, 200 of those in your system. So understanding it's a challenge, but I believe most people, what they face issues with is really using them. And for that, please request your development teams to make things as human friendly as possible. That's where great businesses like Postman are actually built around. So use all of these tools to your advantage.
Good, thanks, Aakash. Next one is a little broader that I see here. You've been technical, like core technical for 10 years, been a founder, then moved into a CPO role, multiple different hats, right? product, business, technology, who owns what in a larger organization? You've probably been a part of the entire life cycle, right? When Gojek was very early, maybe a couple zeros to multiple times that it all grew from there, right? So how does the three of them sit together? And second part is really interesting. How does Gojek really manage to attract the best talent out there? Are there any tips for other people hiring? I think this is from senior product manager.
Yeah. The second one is I think it's a lifelong problem for everyone. Okay, I'll probably deal with the first one. So when we talk about multiple stakeholders, and I would say you have missed few. You have missed data science, you have missed design, you have missed customer support, and I can just add literally every facet, every knowledge or a skill set that needs to be represented at the table. So maybe just going back to the basics, a product manager is nothing but a problem solver. Right? So you have some customer problem, you want to solve those problems. That's your job. While solving those problems, the simpler problems you can solve with one engineer yourself. If you start having UI and UX, then you add a designer over there. Then you start having some scale related issues, then you will add some engineers who can potentially build some large infrastructure. Then you start needing more data because now your problems have become very convoluted. So now you need to add data science over there. Once your problems start running into operations, then you need to support customer support over there and the ops team over there. Now, depending on the problem that you're solving, you need different skill sets to be represented over there to solve the problem. Then you ask the question of ownership. How do you decide ownership in a team sport? I think that's a very wrong way to think of the question, phrase that particular question. Because once you say that, hey, who is the owner, who is on the top, who somehow has veto on, because the reason you need owner is to have veto. Otherwise, you don't have to ask about this question, right? So you're literally saying that who has veto on every decision being made? And there is no one right answer to that question. A good question over there would be who is accountable ultimately for everything to work. Now, that accountability should ideally be with the person who has the most context and it will likely be responsible for the most decisions. So now, for example, if let's say you have one product which is very data heavy, then I would actually want the data person in that team to be accountable for the end outcome for the overall team. In terms of who has veto on which decisions, I think they need to be of that particular domain. Now, of course, the life is not really that simple. So you will come across some decisions where two stakeholders, because there are trade-off, right? So now you have a trade-off between engineering and design. Let's assume very simple thing. It takes certain amount of effort to build amazing animation, which really clarifies what that application is doing at that point in time. But it takes a lot of effort. And now we are trying to do a trade-off. And that's where probably a product manager will have to do a trade-off. The reason I'm giving this convoluted answer is really there is no simple answer. So really think what you're trying to do. Are you trying to hold the overall team accountable on your quarterly reports? Are you trying to decide the trade-offs to be made for that particular iteration about how to push something off? Or you're trying to decide what is the overall strategy of that product? The decision makers needs to be completely different. I hope I did not confuse you more on that.
No.
Certainly, not me, certainly. The part was made it pretty clear, in fact. So.
Yeah. To the next question about how do you hire? I think there is a great book that I recently read called Who, which is quite amazing. I wish I had read that particular book earlier. I mean, I don't generally recommend just books to read, but this is one that I would probably recommend because recruitment is such a big problem. But in terms of hiring the best people, I don't think it's really about, more than the skill sets you really want to look for passion. You want to make sure that you are getting people who are excited to work on what you are working on in the very early stages. As the company grows, and of course, things really change. So from that perspective, building out that team in the early stages versus later stages are two completely different problems. For example, when we started hiring in for Gojek in India, uh, nobody knew what Gojek was, right? So how do you basically hire when your competition is like Flipkart and Ola and Uber, who people can relate to? So that became a completely marketing problem, and that question is probably better answered by Sidhu, who led that whole thing at that time. But yeah, I mean, I think recruitment, thankfully, have a very clear idea. Just read that book; it'll give you quite good hints on that.
Got it. Got it. Thanks so much. What was? I think a couple of folks are asking what is the name of the book again?
Who? WHO.
WHO. I think
Yes.
someone's posted it in the chat section also. So
Chat.
guys, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take another one. So, one question that is pretty interesting here is just shifting gears here. So, I guess you would find a lot of relevancy here with your experiences at Gojek. So, scaled pretty rapidly, right? So,
Yeah.
when you were like scaling this up, what was some of the things that say worked for you in that magnitude? uh, and of course I'm trying to just talk more about the virality and the secret sauce for that word of mouth thingy, right? I mean, um, how do you build that? How do you engineer that virality? Or is it just something that is purely on product? How is it? How does
Is
that
it,
work?
is it even possible? Is can you engineer
Yeah.
virality or is it a market pull? That is a
I think it's a market pull. There is, I mean, that's really the serious answer. It is incredibly difficult to engineer virality on problems that solve something core. So there are two types of products, right? You have products like e-commerce delivery, like the food delivery and transportation. Uh, they're solving some real life, well, real life is a wrong way to put it. They're solving some material goods problems. These are all atoms businesses, right? These are not bits businesses in a way. Uh, for such businesses, you can't create virality. I mean, even if you create virality, it's going to fizzle out. It's really like the core job of a PM in such companies is to find where the dire need is. How do you solve that need? So it's not that you pull the market to you. You need to understand where the market demand is, what the real need on the ground is, and then you go there. So you can't just say that, I've built this product, now I want to make it successful. Like, and I hired someone to manage growth. My product is awesome. Nothing changes in my product, and this growth guy is going to come and somehow just solve my problems. It does not work that way, right? You can do that for digital products, which does not have a lot of commitment and will typically have smaller trends. Yes, you can do that. You can certainly use marketing and positioning in the right way to create those trends so that a large number of people find out about you. But that's marketing. That is not product growth.
correct. Would Clubhouse be an example? Where would you bucket that? The current phase of Clubhouse.
I I think it's both. They are
Okay.
certainly managing the marketing extremely well, like no doubt
Correct.
about it.
Correct.
But they clearly also do solve a real problem. When you see the two coming together, you will one is you will see a lot of people talking about it. The adoption will increase quite substantially. But then, really, what you want to look for is the retention. Like how many people who were gung ho about Clubhouse 3 months back are still gung ho about it and are using it. It has not completely fizzled out. Far from it. It's a fairly successful startup. But it's not that everybody is using it, continuing to use it. So that's how you can see the delta between a product led growth, where typically you change your product to match the customer's needs, versus you've built out the product and now you're just attracting larger and larger number of people to come and discover what is there. Few of them will like it, few of them won't like it.
Fair. Fair.
Sense
So
of
then,
those with the folks who are in growth hacking roles at this point. So I'm sure there would be a few eyebrows raised there and a lot of smiles there as well. So
Yeah, that's for sure. So Akash,
Sorry. So I was saying that the thing is, I have seen those growth roles being done right, where you are really trying to bridge the gap between what the market really wants and the positioning sort of gets right. And then you're also leading changes into the product. You're looking at the incentives and not just burning money sort of incentives, but really how more complex businesses work, right? So that growth is very different than someone who is looked at purely from a marketing perspective. Like, welcome to the human ambiguous world. Like, what I mean by growth and what you mean by growth. We can discuss for an hour and we might still not be on the same page.
true, true. So Akash, then rephrasing or carrying off from what Smart said, when you probably got onto a product role, right? When you switched and you spoke to the CEO and you're like, okay, you handle the charter. What were the challenges that you really went behind? Was it retention? What was the phase of Gojek there? And what did you see as maybe the top three things that you had to work on? Well, I think by that time maybe you did probably find some stability in the tech side of things. So what were the top three things or top three challenges or top three things that you focused on?
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about that particular problem quite a lot afterwards in terms of what is it that I was really trying to do. Uh, and it boils down to uh, reducing uncertainty. I mean, if I just want to put that in one word, you can think of the whole product delivery, right? And at this point, I'll talk about delivery because Gojek didn't really have a problem of finding product market fit. We had already found that. So my job was a lot easier, to be very, very honest. It was actually serving those users and then finding different needs that they have and serve those. It's not about that, oh, I have this product and nobody's using it. That was not the problem. It was more about how do I capitalize it and expand as much as possible. So in that case, you want to make sure that uh, any work that re- that requires a lot more commitment, that requires a lot of effort to change. You want to reduce the churn around that. And in a way, development is really the most downstream activity in product development. You want the inputs to happen early on, but the actual activity happens way downstream. Now, if basically the due diligence that gets done upstream is not of good enough quality, you are going to let the churn come to something which is the most expensive part of your delivery cycles. So my primary job, and I'm pretty sure that holds true even for a smaller companies, even for companies which don't have product market fit, the primary job of a product manager is to provide certainty to other departments, like specifically under the product org, that hey, you know what, this is the direction in which we are going. This is how we are going. Even if there is a change, I will manage the change in a way that just doesn't create direction change every week. Now, that certainty can be in the form of prioritization, that certainty can be in the form of scoping, that certainty can be in the form of staffing. Uh, you just see where the churn is, what's causing most churn, and then you just want to bring more certainty around it. And of course, you don't have certainty around you. Like the world is ambiguous. You can't talk to 1 million customers and know exactly what they want, right? It doesn't work that way. So you're making some assumptions over there, but your majority of your assumptions better be right. Because if not, then you just clearly don't understand the market.
Fair. No, absolutely, absolutely. Smart, do you want to pick up? I think we have 4 minutes to go. You squeeze one in from the audience Q&A, and then I'll jump into the rapid fire.
Yep, sounds good. So a very, very straightforward question. I'm not sure the answer is easy or not, but the question is pretty straightforward. How do you say make a trade-off between your the product that needs to be built, the features that need to be built, and the ability that we have? And this is a two-pronged question. How do you build the ability of the tech team that we have, and the the consequences of this, which is delays of certain critical strategic projects that might happen because of this? How do you prevent this? And if that happens, how do you make sure that it does not happen in the future, or how do you sort this? Like, what is that framework for you?
Sorry, I want to understand the questions more clearly. So you're saying that the trade-off is between building technical capabilities and developing something, which means that the reason you have to do trade-off is people have to spend some time in learning something, is why they're not able to work on something important. Is that the trade-off?
It's more about the requirement that we have and the existing state of the tech team, like the current skill sets that are there already. So around that, yeah.
Have you had that situation or not really?
No, I'm not sure I understand the question very
I
clearly.
think I think there are two parts. I'll probably rephrase it. First
Yeah.
one is today, as a product manager, there's something that I really want to build, right? Hey, I found my users.
Yes.
And I'm struggling to find my tech team. On my tech team, they aren't able. That is probably the situation for
Okay.
the current question. That is one part of it. Second part is there are delays, right? It could be in the communication, it could be different reasons. So let's split it into two parts. How do you deal with two scenarios in case you were in such a
In the
situation?
first one, there is no trade-off because if you can't build it, you can't build it.
That's it.
There is
Like, do
no
you stop?
trade-off.
Got it. Do you stop there, or is there as a product? So as a product manager, I feel like. So do you work in that constraint, or do you do something about it? Like that is where. How
I
would
think
you
it's
approach this?
both. I don't think it's either or. So one is you just ultimately as a product manager, the most important thing is to accept reality as you see it. Well, that holds true for everyone, but especially for product managers because you are going to be on the forward lines with identifying problems and prioritizing those. Right. So you really need to understand what is possible within the team, and if they don't have those skill sets, uh, putting pressure on them is somehow not going to make things better. There is nothing you can do about it, right? So now, given that is the case, you then look at your backlog, you look at what all things can be done, and you prioritize those while you go out and figure out, do you have budget to get some other contractors? Do you want to, I mean, partly I would say that the fault is also with you that you did not predict the kind of skill sets that you need. Remember, I mentioned about building predictability or uncertainty around staffing. This is a prime example of that. Like we should know that in my product strategy, these are the possibilities. As the importance of something increases, I'm discussing it with my tech lead or my other people that, hey, will we be able to do this? If not, do we need to hire? This is part of the planning process, right? So now, given we are where we are, we just need to basically go back, see what my budgets look like, and get some.
Got it. Got it. I think the second
What's the
part
second question?
was around delays in general. This could be, say planned. So I think it could be a planning problem. But in general, in case like say, you are a product manager, you plan something, you've committed to the stakeholder, and then there is stress, right? Because okay, something is not getting shipped out, and you don't feel it's passing QA. So what do you do at that time? Do you might not want to ship a raw product, so you will push it another week. Again, it gets delayed. You have to push it by another week. So how do you prevent this in the future? Is there any way to plan better maybe?
I think this is where, if you remember in my presentation somewhere, I mentioned that this, having a comfort with technology in order to build your trust in your team. Uh, this is that example where, let's say, if that is happening, are you able to talk to your tech lead and understand why it is happening? Like deal with that, like say, as a problem solver, whether it is increasing funnel conversion or if it is about improving technical stability, what is the difference? You need to understand what the reality is. You need to understand what the constraints are. You need to understand what levers you can pull. You need to understand the incentives and then work amongst them. The question is, are you able to have a conversation and understand what the incentives and the levers and the constraints are? Because if you can, and again, I'm not saying that you need to understand so that you can come up with a strategy, but like either that at that point you have a technical team that is not able to deliver. Uh, you have two options. Either you can say that, hey, you know what, I'm going to help you improve your quality. If that's the conversation that you want to have, you can have that conversation. Like if you're a founder, you have no option but to do that. So most founders are actually PMs in a way. So I would extrapolate saying that yes, you have to do that. And at that point, you are thinking, you just have to think critically uh, and understand where the failures are happening. Start monitoring things, start measuring things. Just like your product, once you start measuring things, you will start seeing patterns. As I said, like, you can think of almost any problem like a product problem.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. So thanks for that. I think we're just over time, but Akash, this is my favorite part of this entire session. It's the rapid fire that we usually end with. There are a bunch of questions. So what I'll do is I'll still take those and I'll send it to you over email. If you could pick them up, maybe over Twitter, or we could do a blog and publish it, because there are a couple of interesting questions. But to wrap this session up, awesome, awesome. I'll send that over to you. And to wrap this up, I think is our classic rapid fire. The first one is Akash. You've been in the space for a long time. Bunch of startups who might have been talking to you. So, what are some early stage startups that you are excited about today? Preferably in the Indian space, but okay,
Sure.
even if it's SEA.
Yeah. I'm actually not sure if Air Meat is Indian. If I'm not wrong, it is.
It is. It is.
This is one product which I mean, one space I would say,
Nice.
which I'm very excited about, given the obvious COVID climate. Like this is just booming like anything, helping people meet each other. That's one. The second one would be actually one of my friends' company called Last Mile. They are doing pretty awesome work in uh, improving reliability, helping, like in a way, helping people who probably don't have the required skill sets to improve their own reliability. How do you go there and create visibility? So that's another one very exciting. Uh, but yeah,
Awesome. Thanks. Second one is around interesting folks in the ecosystem. So, top three folks that you'd like to give a shout out to. These could be your mentors, these could be your peers that you think our community would benefit from. Just going and hitting the follow button.
uh, well, not everyone probably tweets as much. Even I don't honestly tweet as
Right.
much. But few people, I'll probably stick to my Gojek world, because there are quite a lot of amazing people that I got to work with. If you want to learn more about recruitment, team building, that sort of a thing, and if you can take some brain cycles from Sidhu, that would go a long way for sure. Um, if you want to understand anything about doing firefights, just how do you basically save scaling systems? Um, both Ajay and Niranjan that I got to work with were quite amazing. So it was a pleasure to work with them.
Right.
The current GoPay product manager, Sudhanshu, he's probably similar as mine to me. Does not really come from either a tech background actually, or
Okay.
product management background. Picked up product management for the first time just as a first principle problem solving in Gojek.
Nice.
Did absolute wonders with food and then has moved to pay. Yeah, I think most of these people, I would say the common pattern is around first principles thinking
Nice.
or critical thinking. I think first principle probably has been converted into a fan following sort of a thing, but just critical thinking. Just accept reality, ask questions, work within the constraint. Don't get frustrated at the problem. Uh,
Got it. Got it. Not part of the rapid fire, but is there a way that people can pick up this skill? I'm sure, like, this isn't inherent, right? So, is there?
it's absolutely not inherent. I did not have that skill.
Okay.
In Gojek, we just failed so frequently that we stopped getting frustrated and finally started focusing on problems.
Oh, wow.
Real, I'm not kidding. It's certainly a learnable skill, but no doubt about it. It's a learnable skill. You just need to stop getting frustrated at the reality that you see around and say that, okay, this is what it is. What is the best I can do with it? And just move on.
Nice, awesome, awesome. I actually got a chance to host Sidhu in the morning. So one thing that is common that I can see right now, you guys are just keeping it real, right? Like, I mean, I probably have seen that, instead of finding an answer, you're just keeping it real, and that is pretty awesome to see. But Akash, last question for you. Little cliche, but what is one piece of advice that Akash would give his 25-year-old self?
25-year-old.
It's not too long ago.
No, it is unfortunately. Uh, uh, I think I followed it to some degree, but not to the extent that I should have. So I would just want to double down on that. Uh, really go looking for interesting people to work with.
Nice.
Don't prioritize what you're going to learn. While a lot of people say that, oh, prioritize what you're going to learn. The problem is you have no idea what you're going to learn, because you join a company, that company can go through any stages. You are going to get some unpredictable opportunities and problems in front of you. You can rarely plan what you're going to learn, but you can plan who you could work with. So
Right.
just be super aggressive in working with people who challenge you and who bring perspectives that you haven't thought about before, because that's the only thing you can control. After that, this is just a journey. You have no idea where you're going to go.
Nice. And that's probably exactly what we're trying to do with this last section, right? Because you guys have been in the space for so long, you know interesting folks, you're probably seeing that. So just by sharing, even just 2, 3 names across, we do this every weekend. So in a year, say, even if you cross 30, 40 sessions, 2, 3 people every session, people have a list at the end to go to. So thanks for being so real. And this was an amazing session. I think we'll probably share a recording with the folks so they can go through the slides again. In case you're open to sharing, I think a couple of folks are already asking for it.
Yeah,
So awesome. We'll probably mail it. But with that, Aakash, thank you so much for your time. I think
thank you so much for arranging this, and I really want to call out that building out the community is the most impactful thing you can do in this country right now. So kudos for doing that.
Thank you so much, Aakash. And Smart, in case.
Yeah, just thanks so much, Akash, for the kind words. And I had fun and a lot of insights there. And yeah, for the folks who are asking for the recording, we'll put it up on YouTube super soon, so you can just watch out that space. We'll also send a feedback form so that you can just fill it up and you'll have access in no time.
Yeah, Akash is he's not as active on Twitter, but if you want him to be, go follow him on Twitter. Give him a shout out. I can see so many people sharing that. It was a great session on the chat section. Go give him a shout out on Twitter. But I'll just find the link. But till then, you can continue what you were saying. Sorry.
Cool. Sounds good. So yeah, by the time Suhas is just posting the handle, it's there live. So you just give him a follow. And yeah, thank you so much, Akash, for this, and we had fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Enjoy the weekend. Bye, guys.